morning, Sophie. Thank you very much for having accepted our invite to these talking meetings. And so we are very glad to welcome to our project and to have you as our talking partner in this project organized by the Fondazione Campagna di Festival in favor of the war in Ukraine in order to support Ukrainian people and also to be part of a network involved in peace building processes. So I want briefly to introduce your profile, and then if you want to say something concerning your work or your education, we are very glad to hear from you. So Sophie Tortladze is the founding general manager of the first biggest cultural event in Caucasus since many years, since 1997. She annually coordinates this festival in Tbilisi, in Georgia, and she also collaborates closely and currently with many European festivals involved in performing arts, such as Edinburgh, or with the Théâtre Bouffes, you know. And so, do you want to introduce yourself?
Well, it's been already 25 years that I'm in the sphere of culture, being international journalist and having had education received not only from Georgia but also from England, from UK, that gave me a big push towards the international world, early 90s, when it was absolutely different situation in Georgia. We were still under a huge pressure of Soviet Union at that time, when it was just nearly collapsed, but Russia was still trying to invade. But you know, divide impera, it's a very famous proverb. So Russia decided to eat our bordering regions early 90s, making them outbreak, and then eventually it occupied our bordering parts from east and west, and starting from 90s we were struggling and we were fighting with Russia to regain our freedom. And especially in 2008, there was a war between Georgia and Russia. In 13 years already, our occupied, 20% of Georgia is occupied. I'm very sorry to say that, but you know, Russia has not implemented any crucial elements from the ceasefire agreement facilitated by European Union. And we are absolutely sure that the European Union and United States reacted more robustly towards Russian aggression, this disaster, what's happening now with Ukraine, would have never happened. Invaders and starting, of course, I need to say that in 19th century, we know the taste of Russian imperial. We are familiar with Russia's imperial taste, because in 19th century, Georgia became totally occupied by Russia, even in 19th century. And that was the time when we were fighting against the Persians and we were fighting against the Muslim Ottomans. And that was the time when Georgia really needed Russian protectorate, because we practiced the same religion and we understood we were looking towards Europe, and we were really led into a huge mistake. But that was the treaty that actually saved Georgia in 1801, because that was the only chance to survive from Muslim invasion and to protect our religion. And that was the decision made by our king, our last king. And after that, Georgia became kind of a under protectorate officially according to treaty, but in reality, Georgia became totally occupied by Russia. And starting from early 19th century, we are fighting against our occupant. And then was the Soviet Union, and for 70 years, you know, what happened in Georgia. And after its collapse, the first thing Russia started, as I mentioned before, it was the divide impera. So he divided to conquer our lands. Final official recognition of the military invasion arrived in 2008, when Russia physically or announced the war. It was a war in Georgia, same what happened in Ukraine, but in a comparably smaller scale, because we are only 11% of Ukraine, our country. And so can you imagine? So now it is like when we are speaking about Ukraine, each and every Georgia thinks that we are speaking about Georgia, because it is our war. It is our war, and we will not surrender. The same way we never surrendered. So every Georgian feels that this is our war. We are in the streets. We are opening humanitarian aid centers. We are going to war. My very close friends, they are soldiers. They went to Ukraine to fight against Russia. Each Georgia thinks that this is our personal war. And involvement, our involvement. So how can we involve? Not only as artists or as doctors or as engineers, each and everyone is totally part of this disaster. It's part of this war. And from the very beginning, when the war started, I received million messages from around the world. How are you? How is your country? And I realized that it is not only me who understands, and not only Georgians who feel that it's our war, but this is global, because everyone understands, every intelligent person understands that this is a war, that Georgia has to stand for its freedom, and for not only for our Ukrainian brothers and sisters, and not only for freedom-loving country, but it is the war against our occupant. Yes. And this is very important. I know that what I want to mention is that there are several ways how artists unite, and this is very encouraging, and this is, I can express gratitude towards everyone around the planet who is trying to do their best to support Ukrainians and support those who are victims of this aggression. But I want to say that nothing would help them more than material support, like, I've just heard there are many initiations, not only people going to war from Georgia, a lot of Georgian young soldiers, and not only soldiers, young people, they doctors, warriors, they went to support. Even women are going there to support others and support children and families. But I've heard that, for example, artists, painters are selling their best work to collect money, to send this money to Ukraine. Everyone in Georgia realizes this as their own duty to do something. You see, I'm running as a general manager, was founded by Sophie Tortladze, who is artistic director of the festival and international board of directors, run by Peter Brook, Vanessa Redgrave, Michael Panjulia, Sasha Waltz, Johan Zanding, a lot of people around the world that decide what they visited Georgia, they saw Georgian art, they saw the infrastructure, they realize that this is the country which has to have international art festival. And you see, because this war is experienced as our personal problem, this is our personal experience. And we run the festival in October, and we have program ready, and we are already budgeting and doing all this, even working on logistics, and we are very, very active to do everything on time. But who knows what will happen in October? Nobody knows. Nobody can see we are all very optimistic. We are all waiting for future, but who knows what it brings? Nobody knows what it brings. And so when, for example, I'm asked as a festival manager, what are your plans to support Ukraine? Practically, I have no idea what will happen in Georgia and what will happen with our festival and what will happen with us. But what I can do for Ukrainians, for example, my mother asked me to adopt little children who lost their parents after bombing. Yeah, I'm seriously thinking about adopting these these familyless people. Not only me, you cannot imagine how many families in Georgia express their will to adopt these children. And of course, a lot of families are welcoming Ukrainian guests, and they're opening their doors to these people. And you cannot imagine how many Russians are walking in Georgian street, in the streets of Tbilisi. A lot of Russians arrived, and I don't know, they arrive because they are afraid, not because they are dissident and not because they are in opposition. You've seen this journalist from, I don't know whether you've seen or not, but I can share the video of the journalist who works in the state television, and she arrived with a poster yesterday night during the 9 o'clock news, and the poster says that people, you are under a big misled, and we are under war, and Russia is lying to you, and the country and the state is lying to you, and this is, you are victims of propaganda. And what we can do, the festival has always welcomed Russian companies who could speak the truth. And even here, even in Georgia, we were, there were so many problems with some parts of audience saying that, come on, we are under occupation and you are still receiving Russian theaters and you are still opening doors to Russian companies. But we were opening doors to those companies who had the only chance at the Georgian stage to speak the truth. And we remember that during the Dmitry Krymov, he is the greatest theater director, and you know him. And when he brought his production, it was called Going to Hunt for Mushrooms. And there was a moment during the scene when he burned Putin. It was just an illusionary. It was just for those who intellectually understood that this was the subtext of the opus. But that is, you know, this was very huge. Of course, those artists who now live in Russia and who are now immigrants, they are living in the United States and in Europe and in other countries. But those Russians who understand that they are in a huge misunderstanding, they cannot do anything. They cannot move a finger. You see, it is just a matter of their brains. They are very much under Russian propaganda because they are feeling very comfortable. They have huge money, they have huge comfort, they speak freely with the international world, and everyone thinks that they are okay. But they're mentally, they are absolutely happy with their government. Mentally, they are happy what their government gave them to form their comfort. You see, and that is the problem. It is just a minor hint on protest, what was evident yesterday at 9 o'clock news when this girl arrived, this woman stood with a sign. This was just a minimal hint. There should happen a revolution within the Russian people. There should start a rebellion in the Russian society against their government. This is the only chance. Otherwise, it is just impossible. No diplomacy, no military, nothing will solve the problem. I myself, I have a Ukrainian blood. My grandfather was Ukrainian. He was a hero of Ukrainian civil war, and he arrived afterwards. He arrived to Georgia, and my grandmother was Ukrainian. So I'm half Ukrainian, and I feel myself not against. What I want to tell you that I don't, the only solution I see in this conflict, and this is not only the matter of who wins now, because this is 144 million people living in Russia. Can you imagine 144 million people to be defeated? They need to change their brains. They don't need to feel guilty and feel defeated. They need to feel themselves rebellious against this horrifying system. They need to fight against it, not to feel like, you know, okay, I'm defeated and I am bad, or I'm in a wrongful situation, etc., etc. They need to feel themselves brave enough to fight against it. And this is very much Georgian character. That's how we survived for, I don't know, for centuries. I appreciate those Russians that I meet in the street to fight against their government. This is the only solution. No diplomacy, no war. This is people-to-people relationship. People-to-people. Journalist did last night when she entered the studio with the sign that we are under war and Russia is treating you wrongly and you are misled people and you are listening the lies and we are aggressors. And this was the hugest event what happened in Russia. And you know, that is the main thing I think that we can do as artists, as managers and festival people, those who people-to-people relationship, you see, to explain, to let them speak out and to help them to understand that nothing will change unless they change themselves and unless they change their attitude. Of course, Ukrainians are considered as our brothers and sisters. You cannot imagine what happens in Tbilisi and in Georgia. You see, if you say you are Ukrainian, that means even more of being Georgian. That means that when I say that people, nobody heard that I'm Ukrainian. I was never saying that. You say only a couple of people remembered my granddad. And when I said that I am Ukrainian, people were absolutely shocked, saying that. So, you know, I realized that this is the attitude towards the brave people. This is the attitude. This is Georgian character, that we appreciate people who can fight for their freedom, who can fight for what they feel is the just. We don't want you to feel guilty and escape from your country. We need you to go back to your country and fight against your government. This is the best way to do. And I was absolutely shocked. Why you are escaping? Because you are losing your freedom or your economic well-being in Russia because of the sanctions, etc., etc. But you are never thinking of uniting yourself with your neighbors, with your friends, with your comrades, with your partners, colleagues, and saying that people, we need to speak out. And we need to speak up against what's happening, because with 1,044 people or 144 million people stand against the government, Russia will change. Of course, I'm not misled, and I don't think that 100% of Russia now suddenly becomes democratic, freedom-loving country, people, etc. But it is important to work with Russians more than, of course, Ukrainians need just material support. If you open your doors, if you give them pension, if you give them money to support, if you employ them, if you arrange whatever is possible to financially support these people to shelter themselves from this war for a certain time, that is important. But Ukrainian does not need any push. Ukrainian knows what is the just and how they need to fight for this just. The people who need their mind change, the people, this is Russian people.
Yeah.
And I don't see any other change. You see, this war continues. Diplomacy does not work. In the back mind, you realize that there is a button to nuclear weapon, and you watch Putin and you think that, for God's sake, come on.